Thank you, President Carl. It is my honor to introduce Patricia Roberts. Patricia is both a higher education savings expert and a mom who's getting her son through college debt-free. And she's on a mission to teach parents and grandparents how to save for post-secondary education so that the children that they love can pursue their academic and career dreams without the crushing weight of student loan debt. She is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Gift of College, Inc. And prior to this, she held key legal and program management roles in the education savings areas of Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, and Alliance Bernstein Investments. Through her work with 529 college savings plans over the past 20 plus years, she's helped tens of thousands of families avoid millions of dollars in student loan debt. And with her newly released book, Route 529, A Parent's Guide to Saving for College and Career Training with 529 Plans, she's helping even more. With $1.6 trillion in outstanding student loan debt, and with 65% of Americans unfamiliar with one of the easiest and most effective ways to save for higher learning, she provides much needed information in an easy to understand term. Her relatable and encouraging style educates, inspires, and empowers those with future students in their lives to avoid the debt and regret associated with not planning ahead for higher education expenses. She also encourages a growing number of employers of all sizes to offer college savings assistance as a voluntary benefit. Patricia attributes her attainment of higher education as the reason she was able to lift herself, her mom, and her siblings out of poverty. And this fuels her determination to help others attain education after high school with as little resulting debt as possible. She holds a BA in philosophy and political science from Duquesne University and a JD from Brooklyn Law School. And she is admitted to the practice of law in New York and New Jersey. And I would be remiss if I did not add that she is a graduate of the esteemed institution of the Bangor Area High School, where we were classmates. Patricia?
Thank you so much, Phil. And indeed, we were classmates, and it's so nice to be back in touch with you. And I thank you so much for having me here today. Maybe by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with college savings plans, in particular 529 plans? Do you have any familiarity? Some? Okay. There's a little bit, yeah. Okay, so as Phil said, nearly 70% of Americans know nothing, so you're ahead of the curve. I'm happy to share with you some of what I know. Can't get through everything in a half an hour, but we'll share some good information with you, and I'd be happy to respond to your questions. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I'm not quite sure how I would do this. Hang on one second. Phil, I may need some help on this. Let's see here. Screen share. There it is. Let me see. Are you folks seeing a presentation? Yes, thumbs up. All right, thank you so very much. So yeah, this is on the right is the book I wrote, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I did that. But indeed, I've spent many years working on this particular topic, and I really am tied to it from a personal perspective. My why in terms of writing the book are some of the things that Phil mentioned. You know, there's over $1.6 trillion right now in student loan debt in the US. Over 44 million individuals are encumbered by it, many of whom surprisingly are reaching retirement years and the end of their lives still having not paid it back. This is a concern. The lack of familiarity with this wonderful vehicle that can help so many concerns me. And even those who do know about them are confused about exactly how they work. So I took some time during the pandemic. I had a little extra time on my hands. I was no longer commuting to work, no longer traveling for business, and I decided I'm going to write a book about this, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm going to talk to you today about the tax benefits, a little bit about the investment options involved in these plans. I want to bust some of the most common myths because there really are some common misunderstandings that need to be cleared up. I'll say a little bit about other ways to save. There's no one way to save for college. Or certainly, this is a way that I happen to prefer, but there certainly are other ways. And then I want to talk to you about getting friends, family, and employers involved in this effort. So my focus today is on 529 college savings plans. These are plans that nearly every state, except for Wyoming, by the way, offer direct to consumers. Your state has one. And they are plans that are offered through financial intermediaries or professionals such as Phil George and his colleagues at his firm. What I'm not focusing on today, there are two other types of 529 plans. One is called prepaid tuition plans. Some states have these and they allow people to buy tomorrow's tuition at today's dollars. Those are more contracts versus investment accounts, not focusing on those today. And there are also 529 ABLE accounts. You should be aware of these. They're very useful, even though they're not my focus today. But these are accounts that allow individuals who are disabled to save for a wide range of expenses, including education, but also a wide range of disability-related expenses that they may encounter. And these plans are great because they don't count for needs-based testing for things like Medicaid, HUD housing, etc. Not the focus of my comments today. I'm focusing on the college savings plans, but I did want you to know there are two other types of 529 plans. So the basics of 529 college savings plans, these are after-tax contributions. So you earn your money and you then contribute it to a college savings account. The earnings, which is kind of exciting, are growing tax deferred. So rather than paying interest or tax on, rather than paying tax on these accounts as they grow in value, you're not doing that. And in fact, if you use the account for the intended purpose, which is a wide range of educational expenses, when you withdraw the money from the 529 account, you will never pay tax on those earnings. So that's an advantage to families. It helps them to save without having to pay tax as the account grows in value. These are federal benefits that I'm talking about. There are state-specific tax advantages as well. Your state, I believe, has a 10% tax credit allowed to taxpayers on contributions up to $2,500 if you're a single filer, or $5,000 if you are a married couple filing jointly. That gives individuals in Vermont a little bit of an incentive to save in the Vermont plan, although you do not have to. You can invest in any plan around the country. And in fact, if you work with someone like Phil or an advisor in another firm, they will tell you about a wide range of plans. You're not limited to your state plan, but you should be aware of the state tax advantages. And there are special estate and gift tax advantages to 529 accounts that I'll touch on a little bit later. Other features and benefits that I think are important for you to know about is the account owner owns the account and controls it. Unlike trust accounts that are sometimes set up for a future student, where the monies become that child's upon reaching the age of maturity. 529 accounts always stay within the control of the person who opened the account. It's often a parent or grandparent. It does not need to be, but the child doesn't get to run off with the money when they turn 18 or 21. If they've decided to buy a Harley instead of going to Harvard, the parent does not have to give them that money. The parent decides when and if and for what purpose that money comes out. People like that. There are low minimums to get started. Many of the state plans, the direct-to-consumer plans at least, allow you to get started with $25 or even less. There are high maximum contribution limits. If you are able to save a significant amount, you can save several $100,000 in these plans. There are not income limits on participation, and there are some good low-cost investment options, and the plans are quite flexible. So what can you use them for? You know, they're called college savings plans, but truth be told, you can use them for a wide range of educational expenses. 2-year and 4-year colleges and universities, trade and technical schools, professional schools, graduate degrees, Even registered apprenticeships can be paid for with 529 college savings plans. So do not think they are just for traditional colleges. And these can be institutions in state, out of state, and even around the world. And there is a way to check if the institution you're considering is one. Generally, most accredited institutions are, but I did put a US Department of Education reference there for double checking if you're thinking of a particular school. But these can be cosmetology schools, cooking schools, all sorts of forms of education that a student post-secondary may consider. And what types of expenses while at those schools? These are useful for tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, equipment. We had computers added a few years ago. Certainly students need computers, and special needs services. If the student has special needs, there are additional services that can be paid for with the 529 college savings plan. The investments, I won't get too deep into this, but many of the 529 plans have age-based investment tracks. Those of you who are invested for retirement may be familiar with having a target date fund as something that you've invested in. That target date fund, the target is when you intend to retire often. The age-based is similar in that really the target of it is when the child would likely go to college. So the professional investment management teams at a wide range of firms who manage these 529 assets set them up in such a way whereby they are more aggressive when the child is young and the accounts become, or the investment design becomes more conservative as the child ages. For those who aren't interested, I would say probably 70% of those who invest in 529 plans do pick the age-based option. They just have the investment manager put their child in the one that's best linked to their age. But even within those, you can pick conservative, aggressive, or moderate. And then there are also static or target risk options that you can select. You could select a balanced portfolio. You could select something that's, 100% equity. You could select something. Some of the state plans have a stable value option or a very conservative option, such as something that's FDIC insured that a family could pick. And what people need to realize is when you get something that's fully insured like that, you're not going to have the potential of earnings as you would have in something that has more of a mix to it. But there is a wide range for just about everybody. The special estate and gift tax issues that I wanted you to be aware of. Grandparents sometimes are interested in learning about this because the IRS allows for Section 529 accounts, they allow an individual, an account owner, to contribute up to 5 years of the annual gift limit all at once. So 15,000 is the limit that's permissible. But they allow you to do 5 times that, or $75,000 you can deposit all at once in a 529 account. And what you can't do then for the next 5 years is contribute to that same child. It really is prorated over those years, but it does give individuals an opportunity who do have substantial assets to move these assets out of their taxable estate. Again, it's often grandparents who want to do this, and to set it up in a 529 account and to do it in a lump sum such as this. Some of the myths I already mentioned, they're called college savings plans, but they're not only for college. So that's a myth. People think it has to be college, it has to be in-state, not the case at all. Some think that the account owner has to be related to the beneficiary. That's not true. A godparent, for instance, could set up an account for a godchild. It could be an aunt or uncle. It could be, somebody who's unrelated that cares about a particular child. The issue about investing in your home state plan, well, it's good to look at your home state plan. Yours happens to have a tax advantage you might want to consider. You don't need to do that. Some think you lose it if you don't use it, if the child doesn't go to college. That's not true. The money always belongs to the account owner, and I'll explain to you how that would work in the event a child did not need to use it. Others fear that there's a really significant adverse impact to financial aid. Not the case. There's insignificant impact, but it's still better to save than to count on financial aid. Financial aid is often student loans. And others are of the impression that higher education will be free and there's no need to save. I know there is movement towards free community college, free tuition under certain circumstances. I would not bet on higher education being completely free. And I still think it's better to save than to put your money on an assumption that something's going to be free in the future, because even if it is free, it may just be tuition. It wouldn't cover room and board. It wouldn't cover books and supplies. So there's still really a need to save, in my view. If that beneficiary doesn't pursue post-secondary education, I find it highly unlikely that a child wouldn't pursue some form of education. But I want people to know the account remains within the control of the account owner. They don't lose that money. They can maintain the account until the child figures out their life or takes a gap year. They can change the account beneficiary to a member of that original beneficiary's family. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but it could be a sibling, cousin, aunt, or uncle. If the parent owns the account, they can even change it to themselves. Maybe they want to pursue some form of higher education or retool some skills that they have for their own career. So lots of things to do if this child doesn't need it. Or you, of course, can take a non-qualified withdrawal. There is a penalty on those earnings because you had not paid tax on them as they were growing. And I'll talk to you about it, but you can always take the money out in that unlikely event. Another thing a lot of parents do, if their child really doesn't want to go to college, they save it for their grandchildren because they know that that child will likely perhaps marry or have a child someday. The member of the family who you can change it to, really broad. I won't go into every one of these, but you can see how broad a list this is of the individuals you could change that beneficiary to in the event the first one didn't need or want the money. And then that non-qualified withdrawal, fair enough, that money had been growing tax-free the entire time you had it invested for your child or loved one's education. You do need to pay that tax. If you're going to take it out and not use it for any qualified purpose, you've got to pay the tax. You hadn't paid it all along. The tax is only on the growth. And in addition, there's a 10% penalty, a federal penalty for having not used it for its intended purpose. Again, that penalty is only on the growth. So if you've saved $10,000, it's now, you've contributed $10,000, it's now worth $11,000. That penalty is only on the $1,000, that growth, not on the full amount. And there are exceptions. If the child unfortunately dies or becomes disabled, no penalty there. If they receive a scholarship and you don't need the money, you've got proof that the child has a scholarship and you don't need the money, get your money out without that penalty. And if the child attends a military academy, no penalty there either. There's some fairly recent developments to 529 plans. I won't get into them at length, but I do want you to know they can be used for K-12 tuition. They can be used to a small extent to repay student loans, which is sort of hard to wrap your head around, but sometimes parents want the child to go to school, borrow the money, and if they do well, they'll take the money out of the 529 and repay the child's student loan. They can do that, only $10,000 they can do it, but they can do that. And this apprenticeships that I mentioned before, 529s now cover registered apprenticeships. In terms of other ways to save, when comparing 529s, lots of ways. You've heard of these trust accounts called UGMA or UPMA accounts, perhaps. Life insurance, there's taxable accounts, retirement vehicles sometimes people use. What I want you to know is, I won't get into each of these. Again, I think any way that people save is a good thing to do, but I would consider who controls the account. Because remember, in those UGMA, UPMA, or trust accounts, the control transfers to the beneficiary when they each reach majority. I think of that. I think of any federal or state implications from a tax perspective. Financial aid, these accounts, 529 accounts, count very little towards financial aid. Think about if you're putting it in a type of account that would count more, I'd look at that. Fees and expenses associated with investing. and whether there's any limitations or penalties associated with whatever you're considering. My tips on saving, I always tell people to embrace their why. I know when my husband and I had our son, we were paying back over $100,000 in student loan debt. And we were determined that our child would have a better experience than we had going through higher education without the stress that we had in paying it back. So part of my vision for my son was for him to have a better experience, more options. So I encourage families to really think about why do they want to do this and to visualize the outcome they'd like to see for their child and family. Other tips on saving is I encourage people to look at their expenditures. People don't realize that the amount they can save often has to do with the amount that they are spending. So look at and see if there are things you can cut out. In my family, we cut out cable television when my son was in middle school, and that helped us to save a substantial amount over those years leading up to college. I would commit to earmarking a certain amount for college if you can. I'd get started even if I only had a small amount. Any amount saved is that much less that they'll need to borrow and repay with interest. If I could, I'd recommend for you to contribute automatically. I took money out of my paycheck to save for my child. The money didn't cross my hands first, and that was an extremely effective way for me to save. So I would think about some sort of, it doesn't have to be from your pay, but maybe from your bank account. I'd suggest people contribute found money. I tell families when the child gets out of diapers, that's a huge celebration, right? The child's potty trained, so many reasons to celebrate, but you've been spending money on diapers all along, $50, $60, $70 a month on diapers and wipes and supplies and creams. Take that money and put it in a college account perhaps. Or maybe when your child's out of daycare, or maybe if you're a mom or dad who had stayed home during the child's early years and you're back at work, add some of that money if you have a little bit more income. Think of ways where tax refunds is another one. If you come across money that you're no longer spending on something else, or it's a windfall of some sort, I'd suggest contributing it. The other thing I suggest, and I don't know, Phil, I don't think there are any students on the call today, but I did want to suggest that students and their family really make smart choices when it comes time to pick a college. I suggest people not get their heart set on any one institution. It may be the child's dream, but it may be a dream that you cannot simply afford based on what the school offers in terms of aid. So I would keep an open mind about options. I would consider things like even starting at a community college and transferring later on if a child is able to follow through on that type of commitment. That can save a considerable amount of money. And to just think about, there's a lot of excellent institutions, and don't get stuck on one, particularly a high-priced one that's it might be a dream school, but it may lead to a bit of a nightmare over the next 10, 20, or 30 years of having to pay back those costs. My other tip is to get others involved. Oh, I think I dropped my menorah here. I did have that as well. But for holidays and things, friends and family are often giving gifts to children. And one thing to suggest, rather than clothes and gifts and toys that can be quickly outgrown, clothing in terms of interest and size, ask your friends and family to instead help you with the college account. Now, they don't need to use what my firm offers, but I want to tell you about it. They can certainly give you a check and you can deposit it yourself into your college savings account. But I wanted you to know my firm offers gift cards, gift of college gift cards that you could give to somebody as a baby shower gift or as a child's birthday gift. These are redeemable into most any 529 college savings plan account. I give them for baby showers or child's birth or birthdays, and parents seem to like them because there's really nothing else they can do with them. They've got to redeem it into an account. And many parents tell me they've gotten started as a result of my giving them that gift card. So you could certainly encourage friends and family. These happen to be available in Vermont at Kinney Drugs and Cumberland Farms. You might have to ask to find them because they're fairly new. And I think, some of the probably more popular brands are higher up on the shelf, but do ask if you're interested in knowing about that. Also, I get employers involved. Any of you who are employed or who are employers, you should keep in mind that you can help your employees save for college. You can provide them with information on saving for college, or you can offer a match or contribution. We have a lot of employers now who are using our gift cards to welcome a birth or an adoption in their company, rather than giving a silver spoon or something that's, not really needed. So keep in mind that employers can help. And then I wanted to tell you about my account beneficiary. Here he is in kindergarten, and there he is at high school graduation. His name is Benjamin, and we did save for him, and he will be graduating from Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, debt-free in June. And I can't tell you how proud I am of that. And I'm going to turn it back over. I don't know, Phil or Marty, people have questions, I welcome them, and I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen. My book, if you're interested, is available on Amazon. And thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.
What a great program. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take the screen off now. Phil can always get you in touch with me if you need, I'm sure. Okay, here we are again. I hope that was okay. I see a hand up, but you guys handle how you will the questions.
Marcy? Marcy? You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a scenario. Let's say 20 years ago, you put money into a 529 for a child, and that child really isn't going to go to college. But you have children of another child who, and you mentioned K through 12, might be used there or might be used for their college. So instead of having, and you really want the money for this child you originally put it in for, you meant the money to be for that child. So instead of that child cashing it in and losing 10%, me being the owner, do you just simply say it's for now the beneficiary of a grandchild, and then this child gives that child the equal amount, so there's no 10% loss, and then they use that money to pay for their child, if that makes any sense to you?
I think I've gotten a little bit lost. Certainly you can change the beneficiary to another child and have them use it for their qualified expenses. I wasn't sure about that child then giving the money back. That confused me a little. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Well, if you originally put the money in and you wanted that money to be saved for this particular child, no matter whatever happened, but if that child just cashed it in, they're going to lose 10%. So if you just simply change the beneficiary to another child's child, if that child was going to spend the money for their children to go to school, and it was a certain amount, couldn't they just give that amount to this child over here so that he didn't lose the 10%? And they're getting the benefit of the exact same amount of money.
Yeah, so you're saying outside of a 529 plan, if those other parents had money set aside, earmarked for their child, could they just give it? I guess presumably they could. I just want to stress that 10% is not on the full amount. It's only on the earnings. So they lose the 10% only on the earnings. But
Right.
yeah, I guess within a family, if they wanted to work something like that out, I don't know the tax implications. That's outside of 529, but that's certainly a creative idea.
Sherry Ann?
Yes, I just want you to know, Patricia, my son is also a graduate of Clark University. Unfortunately, I wish that I had a 529 because we're still paying. But thank you, thank you. I wish I'd heard this many years back.
I hear that all the time.
Someone has a hand up, but I can't see who it is. JWA iPhone has a yellow hand up. There we go. Jennifer. You're on mute.
Darn cell phone hitting those little buttons. Yeah, I started a 529 plan for my daughter. We started it when she was shortly after she was born, as soon as she had a social security number. She ended up going to community college instead of a big 4-year college. So there's still lots of money left.
I'll take
But
it.
we were informed which I'm happy about, but we were informed that if she decides to go back to school later to pursue a certification for something or a higher degree or whatever, she can still use that, and that it can be passed on to her children to use, which
That's
I thought was wonderful.
That's right. And congratulations. Smart move, opening it early. Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
yeah. We started that on a investment account for her as soon as we had the Social Security number.
It's good that you were aware. Thank you.
Good
Maggie,
financial advisor.
Maggie, do you have some question?
Hi, I have actually two questions. You had said that the 529 plan does not impact financial aid.
It does very minimally, and I can explain to you exactly how, but go on.
So that was one question. And the second question is, so I have two kids, and from the day they were born, we started putting money away into 529s. And I'm wondering if one kid graduates from college and there's still money left over in the 529, can I switch it into the other kid's name? Or if the first kid, it's going to take more than 4 years to finish school, can I take money from the younger kid's 529 and put it towards the older kids?
Yeah, you can move money around. Yeah, you're
Okay.
either changing the beneficiary or you're reallocating. Talk to your 529 plan. They have special forms for that, but you certainly can do that. In terms of the federal financial aid impact, these are considered parental assets. They are not considered assets of the child because, as I said, the parent or account owner owns the account. So they are counted very minimally. 5.64% of the account value is considered toward the expected family contribution. So if you have $10,000 saved, what FAFSA will look at is $564 of that only. That is way better. If your money is in an UGMA or UPMA account, something that's the child's, they'll count up to 20%, up to 50% of the value. 529 is a good way to go. There's a little impact, but it's still better to save than to not save and not have the impact. So it's a small, and we're working on the federal level to try to get that removed, even any impact, but it's minimal.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information.
I hope this was helpful. I know we're at 1 o'clock. I hope you learned something, and I hope you all have good outcomes with those future students in your life, and that this type of information is valuable to you.
Patricia, I'm going to throw two more questions at you. I think all these grandparents might be interested in. One is, can they move investments over, gifted investments? So if I had 100 shares in some well-known bank like TD, but I had a gain in it, so if I gifted those shares over, that's just like a contribution to that account?
You cannot, yeah, let me just answer that. You cannot move securities in kind. They have to be liquidated and then contributed.
And then second question would be, is there self-directed investment funds, or are they only those timed funds? Can you do a self-directed 529?
Yeah, there are 529 plans that have well more than those structured age-based options that I spoke about. Phil's nodding his head. There are a number of plans where you can pick a variety of investment options. They're not individual funds. They're pooled funds, but yeah, you can pick a number of different styles of investing. You can only change your investment direction twice a year. Unlike other investments where you can be, trading all the time, in 529, they really want you to keep it more consistent. It's probably not even prudent to be constantly.
So does it have to be a fund? It can't be, you couldn't buy 100 shares of Tesla.
That's right.
Just specific. So it has to be a fund.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So it's not really self-directed. Okay.
No, I mean, it is self-directed. It's not individual investments. You can direct the types of investments that are offered by a particular state or a program manager. Yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you. So nice to be here and see Phil again. I'm happy.
Good. Okay. Well, with that, we'll wrap the meeting up today, and we'll see you all next week. Have a good day.
Thank you.